I was a wrestler for 12 years. I started when I was in second grade and I wrestled all the way until my senior year of high school. I chose not to pursue it in college, but I did learn a lot along the way, and it's a sport that I hold very near and dear to my heart. When most people think of the word wrestling or the sport wrestling, they think of professional wrestling. WWE, Monday Night Raw, lots of fake blood, lots of drama. That is not what true wrestling is. Wrestling is the oldest sport in history. Historians have found it dating back to 15,000 years ago via pictures on cave dwellings. It was the first Olympic sport in the Greek Olympics, and it's since declined in popularity. It's now the seventh most popular U.S. high school sport for boys. But wrestling is an incredibly important part of USA sports, and there are some things that go unseen about it. There are three types of wrestling. The first and most common throughout the entire world is freestyle wrestling. You score points by taking your opponent down, and the entire match is wrestled on the feet. You get extra points for exposing your opponent's back, and the main way to take someone down is with a leg attack. Greco-Roman wrestling is the second most common type of wrestling in the world. That is similar to freestyle. You get points for taking your opponent down and exposing his back to the mat, but you cannot use leg attacks. You can only use upper body throws, upper body locks, trips, things of that nature. Both freestyle and Greco-Roman are in the Olympics. And recently, within the past two Olympics, the Olympic Committee has been trying to remove freestyle and Greco-Roman wrestling. But with an enormous pushback from the wrestling community throughout the entire world, we were able to save it and keep it in the Olympics, as it should be, because it is the original Olympic sport and the oldest sport in history. Now, folk style wrestling is not wrestled in the Olympics, but it is the type of wrestling that both college, high school, and middle school wrestlers would participate in the United States. It is wrestled on your feet and on the mat, three different periods consisting of different positions, and you get points for back exposure and for taking your opponent down, just like in freestyle and Greco-Roman. The scoring is slightly different, but they're very comparable. There are a lot of things that go behind the scenes in wrestling. And it's an incredibly tough sport, and a lot of people aren't able to appreciate how tough it is because they don't understand what goes on. Probably the toughest part of wrestling is cutting weight. Any serious wrestler at a competitive level has cut weight before, and it is not easy. For a long time, there were no regulations implemented, and kids were cutting dangerous amounts of weight. You have that classic picture in your mind of a wrestling team running through your hallways with garbage bags and sweatsuits on to make weight before the wrestling match. It's unhealthy, but everyone does it. It's how you stay competitive in the sport. And as of late, regulations have changed to ensure that kids are not cutting dangerous amounts of weight. Practice is another part of wrestling that is tough and goes unseen completely. Practice is 10 times harder than any competition one wrestler could participate in. Practice every day, and it is grueling. They are preparing you for these situations, and you push yourself mentally and physically harder than you ever would have before. One of the hardest parts about wrestling is losing. When you go out there on the mat, it is you versus the other person. So when you lose, it's no one's fault but your own. A lot of wrestlers have a tough time adjusting to that. I know that kids club wrestlers often have the upper hand in that situation once they reach high school, because as a young kid wrestling, you learn how to accept your losses. I know myself, I started out crying after my losses when I was in second grade, third grade, but now as soon as I got to high school, I knew how to handle myself, I knew how to lose graciously, and I knew how to win graciously. It's a sport that teaches a lot of etiquette and a lot of mental toughness. and it's incredibly valuable. Wrestling is a sport with a lot of heritage and tradition. It's held very highly, or in very high regard by a lot of countries: the United States, Russia, Iran, China, Armenia. It's incredibly competitive, and it teaches important lessons. First and foremost, being mental fortitude. One cannot participate in wrestling without deriving lessons of mental strength and mental toughness from it. It's applicable to more than just wrestling and helps in the day-to-day life. You battle adversity like no other and learn how to push yourself to your limits, both mentally and physically. And there aren't many sports that would educate young men and young women like that.